So my formal title is Dr Euan Speirits, but just call me Euan.
Euan, okay.
And I run a company called Action Sports Medical. Mm-hmm. So we work with professional action sports athletes, so guys in the kind of more extreme end of sports, predominantly mountain biking. That's kind of come off me racing mountain bikes at a all right level for the past few years.
How long have you been riding mountain bikes?
Riding them
Yeah.
for about 15 years.
Right, okay.
Racing them properly, as in properly racing them, probably about 5 or 6.
And you still do that, yeah?
Yeah, I still try to.
Try to.
But is this year your last Fort William World Cup? I just saw on Facebook earlier.
Emotional times. It's my last Fort William World Cup because I'm moving away.
Wait, how many have you done up to now?
Raced 4 of them.
Okay.
And I've been going to them like as a spectator before that because I knew a lot of the guys that raced it and things, so it's kind of been part of my life properly for about 10, 11 years.
Right, okay.
Is the Pro Tour part of it again still this year?
Yeah, so like there's a couple of different disciplines at mountain biking World Cup. So there's like big downhill World Cup Sunday, but Saturday night's like 4 cross racing, which is the kind of racing I do. So you have like, if you've seen BMX racing at the Olympics, there's like 8 guys like stacked in a gate, all going on a track at the same time. It's kind of the same for us, but there's just 4, and it's like an off-road mountain bike course.
Where did the transition come from, then like biking to like the whole medical side of things? Was that just like complete chance?
Or
with your background, I suppose.
Yeah, like it kind of came from like I've always done sport, so like I had a tennis racket kind of put in my hand at like age 3 or 4. Can't even remember,
okay.
like cannot remember the first time I was on a tennis court like that early, and played tennis, like serious tennis, until about 15, 16, until I realised I probably wasn't going to make it, and if I did,
And you're screw it, I'm going to be a doctor.
Anyway, I answer that question makes me sound like an asshole. But like loads of like the guys I played with went off to like Spain to like tennis academies and stuff, and then they came back and they ended up working as tennis coaches, and I was like, it's got to be really tough to actually make it. And my mum and dad were like, just like stick at the books, like get yourself to university, go do something, because if anything goes wrong, like you won't be able to play tennis anymore, kind of thing. So like I'd always had that like sport and competition aspect of things alongside, I mean, I was playing like 12 hours of sport alongside going to like school and stuff and doing my hires and things like that. So I've always had the two, they've always been important to me. So like went through like medical school and stuff, and was racing more seriously, and so I'd never really kind of planned to get into sports medicine, as it were, like especially with mountain biking, until I was up training for an event at Fort William I was racing for a team at that point, and they were all racing like, so they do like a kind of national level race about 2-3 weeks before the big World Cup in Fort William, and I was up training for that, and one of the like pretty much like Britain's biggest rider, G Atherton, like rides for Red Bull. He's a big name. Like if you go to Red Bull's headquarters down in London, like obviously massive company, the first thing you'll see when you walk in is a picture of G.
Right, okay.
He is he's like,
He's been on Top Gear.
Yeah,
Racing James May down the town.
Yeah, it's like
I think I might have seen this. Was he in like a car and it was like going down steps and stuff? Yeah, that's what I thought. I think I've seen that.
The way that downhill works is like the fastest guy goes last. So it was probably like 3:30 in the afternoon, and he just didn't come down the hill. So like it's a really rough track, so everyone kind of assumes like, oh, he's like broken his bike, he's had a puncture or something like that. And we all like thought, oh well, we'll see him at the bottom, we'll see what actually ended up happening with it. But you don't kind of give too much thought to it. And I was like helping the team pack up the pits and stuff, and a couple of the race organisers knew me and came over because they knew like, so I do orthopaedic surgery mainly, which is like bone and joint surgery, and they were like, we've just heard over the radio that we think G's dislocated his hip. I was like, oh God, what? So they were like, there's something wrong with the recovery process here. Would you mind hopping in the gondola, going up to the top and seeing what's going on with G? So I ended up like getting in the gondola and heading up, and I was sitting with G's manager, which was kind of weird because like I'd gotten into the sport mainly through media production stuff. Right. So like the Athertons were like, they were one of the teams that were big enough to have good media production. So I'd grown up like watching all of their stuff. The Atherton project. Yeah, it was so huge. Like Clay Porter filmed most of it, and it was a proper web series. Just when YouTube was really like getting going, and so I'm like now in this situation where I'm like, my teenager self is like, but I'm like, oh no, I might have somebody who's really injured and I've got to be professional about this. So I got to the top, and what had happened was like G had gone to go off a takeoff on his bike, and basically everyone was starting running these like bigger wheels because it was like this progression, like most people own a bike that's got like 26-inch wheels. Right, okay. But these guys were going up to bigger and bigger wheels to try and like, you know, if you go over something on a skateboard, everything feels really harsh. Whereas if you go over something on a bigger wheel, it smooths it out. So like the downhill guys, because they're riding really rough stuff all the time, were using these bigger wheels. But the problem is that when you try and like take the bike up into you so that you don't like go really high off of a jump, he actually caught his ass in the tire at the back, and it basically wedged and stopped him and just flung him over the bars. Oh, really? And he'd just gone down and his hip had come out. But it was really rare for that to happen. Like if somebody comes into accident emergency with a dislocated hip, the thing that's probably caused it is they've been in a car crash. Right, okay. And like the dashboards like hit their knees and like.
So what's the process for putting a hip back in?
Well, if you've got an average...
Sure it's pretty painful.
Yeah, it's not pretty. No, but the thing is, like, on like an average person, I probably could just about do it. Right. But if you're listening to this, like, look at G Atherton, just go on his Instagram and look at a photo of him, and you're like, oh my God, that's the Hulk. Like,
big hips.
He is a hench boy.
And I was like, there's no chance, absolutely no chance. And like the thing is, like, usually what will happen is you'll like break your pelvis, so you'll break your femur before your hip comes out, and that can cause internal bleeding, and that can kill you. So I was like going, right, we really need to get on top of this now. The guy who was there for recovery, like, if I'm honest, I didn't have a lot of confidence in what was going on, so I kind of was just like, right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get him off the hill. There's so much wrong with like the recovery process, like, but it took us about 2 hours to get him off the hill, and then I phoned along the road to the hospital, and they're like, Fort William's like quite a small hospital, and the person was like, right, I've actually got a car crash coming in about half an hour. So I was like, right, well, I guess I can leave you to do that if you let me just deal with this. So I ended up riding the ambulance with him to the hospital, sorting everything out, did x-rays and stuff, and then shipped him off to Inverness to get his hip put back in. And I was just like, after kind of the dust settled, as it were, it was kind of like 8:30 at night or something like that, and his team manager just like took me to McDonald's across the road. And we were just sitting, and I don't know if you like if you watch Rick and Morty at all, but you know the bit when they get back in the car and they're just like, oh, after what was meant to be a 5-minute adventure, and it's been like 20 days of their life. And we were just like, oh my God, that was horrendous. And I thought, you know what, like, maybe it'd be good to have somebody who races at roughly that kind of level, who actually works with athletes as well and comes with them. And if shit's not sorted, like if there's anything that people aren't happy about, then I can kind of be that bridge of conversation between athletes and like race organisers and medical staff and stuff like that. So yeah, that was kind of the unfortunate circumstance that started it, but at the same time it put me in conversations with people where I thought, well, this is what I can offer, this is what I can maybe do about this. And like there's a really, really strong kind of feeling of family within mountain biking. It's a big sport, like it gets massive viewing figures on Red Bull TV and stuff like that, but the core group of people that actually do it they're not huge at that kind of world level. So if anything happens, like everybody talks to each other all the time, and there's a feeling like if you go anywhere in the world and you're a mountain biker and you connect with another mountain biker, they'll usually just go so much out of your way to help you. Like, I've chatted to people in like France for like 3 or 4 days who stay in New Zealand, and they've been like, yeah, just come to New Zealand, like just get on a plane, come over, we'll put you up, we'll take you mountain biking, we'll take 2 weeks off work and we'll just go ride. And that's kind of how it works. So that put me in conversations with people that are like, yeah, well, you ride, so like we trust you, like you're part of that family, so you can like start maybe trying to make a difference about this. Yeah, so that kind of launched Action Sports Medical for me.
So how long has that been now since you started it?
A little over 2 years.
A little over 2 years, okay. And what's the process been like?
Right now I'm doing it basically just outside of NHS work.
Okay.
So
you are still working for like NHS doing your...
Yeah, so I still do like a lot of knee and hip replacement surgery.
Right, okay.
And I do like a lot of, like I'm doing a PhD just now as well, like researching hip replacements.
So where are you working just now?
Glasgow Golden Jubilee National Hospital out in Clydebank.
So is this for your PhD?
No, so it's kind of separate to it actually. So the hip replacement stuff is like just my PhD work, but we also do work with time trial cyclists. So we have like if you've ever seen like behind the scenes footage of like the Avengers or stuff like that when they go and do motion capture analysis, so you can like do 3D overlay on people. So we have one of those motion capture labs along at the Golden Jubilee, and we use it for analysing patients' walking patterns after they've had knee and hip replacements. But we started thinking, well, this would be a great way to actually analyse cycling, because all the joint angles you achieve and how much pelvic rock and things like that, we can tell like 100 frames a second to within like 0.1 of a degree accuracy. So we started looking at that along with measuring people's frontal area with just a little bit of green screen work and some camera work.
That's weird, like the crossover between like our industry and that. Yeah. That's really strange. And I never knew that they did that.
Yeah, it's research, like you end up doing all kinds of weird things like right on the fringe of what you know. So like I've had to learn how to do basic electronic engineering for my PhD, and because it's technically an engineering PhD, I've had to learn so much about like structural and mechanical engineering, and I think you've got to have a really like hungry mind to go and do it. You just want to devour knowledge as much as you can and just be like, no, all knowledge is useful, and retain as much as you possibly can.
I never really thought about it, but yeah, I suppose hip replacements are engineering.
Yeah, it's so much engineering, because like deciding on like bearing size in terms of like how your hip works within a cup and stuff like that, and then mechanically like how likely that is to you get what's called like a jump out distance, which is like your center of head to edge and stuff like that. It's all raw engineering. And thankfully I kind of had an interest in that because of bikes, because bikes are still developing so much all the time. So everybody is like a closet engineer or a keyboard engineer when it comes to mountain biking, and that they think they're like, oh, this travels way too much and this
sounds like you.
A bike came out recently that I just, all the comments on Pickback were just, look at the head angle is ridiculous on that.
Yeah, everyone kind of thinks they know best.
Yeah, that's going to snap straight away. I was like, I'm sure they've tested it.
Yeah, exactly. But then again, you look back at like how bikes were maybe like 10 years ago or so, and you're just like, oh my God, we were riding them.
I can't believe some of the things people rode down on like the bikes. It was just like, bars like this skinny, like either no suspension or very little suspension, and just
But yeah, it's like you kind of have an interest in things from that side of it. And so yeah, started working with time trial cyclists as well, and we started looking at like the frontal area and like what happens if you put them on a shorter crank length, because everybody thinks like, oh, like a long crank's like a good lever, like you'll be able to get so much more power, but the reality is you have to like spin a really big lever really, really fast with your legs. So like it's like having an engine with too much displacement that starts rocking itself to bits. Whereas if you have like a small crank length, like because you're like really over the front of the bike as well, trying to stay really aerodynamic, it means that you kind of, it's almost like if I asked you to do a squat and you sat down too low, you'd be like, oh, that's really tough to get back out of, but it just means you're only like bending your knees a little bit so you can like power back more easily. So we started saving time trial athletes about 3-4% over a 20-minute effort, which is huge. Like as soon as you start talking single digits in terms of gains, when it like in cycling, that is massive. In Formula One, it would be impossible. Like you'd be spending like close to $1 billion or something to get a like 1.5% increase, but we were in time trial guys saying like realistically 3 or 4%, and this was just in like initial testing on things that they weren't used to, so started looking pretty promising.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, I've ended up doing such a mixed match of stuff, but it's all interesting.
So are you, is it purely like the engineering side of things, or do you do like the actual like surgery and stuff as well?
I do the actual surgery as well.
Right, okay.
I'm not the lead surgeon in that situation.
Right,
I'm
okay.
still like pretty young for that. I've still to go through like further aspects of training.
So you registrar at the moment rather than...
Yeah. So it's called like a specialist registrar position, like a research fellow position. So not like total bottom end, like middle pack. Middle pack's probably the best way to do it, like time served apprentice.
So for your actual business stuff, are you just working as like a one-man band just now?
Essentially, yeah. So I kind of worked on an as-need basis with athletes. So I basically like, everybody knew who I was, and if they needed help with something, they kind of just got in touch.
Okay.
And I kept it on like working at that level for a little while, and that changed really last year so there's a really big mountain bike series called the Crankworx World Tour. So they're kind of like this massive rolling festival that goes around 3 venues around the world. So
I have heard of Crankworx. I think during lunch, Liam always gets like biking and stuff up in the TV. So
yeah, it's just... Alan from Brugger, he's been to Crankworx.
Has he?
Yeah, he was in Whistler last year. I found out last week.
Yeah, so Crankworx, to kind of give you the background on it, was like it started in Whistler, like so a massive kind of northwest skiing village, and they were like, what can we do to promote our summer season, because there's all the lifts there, and it was kind of before mountain biking was enough of a commercial investment to make summer seasons worthwhile like operating and running for. And they kind of started this festival series, so it has like lots of different events, and if you've ever watched like snowboard, like slopestyle or half pipe at the Olympics, it's the same deal but on mountain bikes. You get loads of really awesome people from different disciplines, and like one gate you could end up against a professional downhill racer, or the next gate you're up against like a professional slopestyle rider. Right. So it's like a big kind of melting pot of different skill sets. And I got humbled pretty fast, if I'm honest, but that's kind of how I've always seen sport. It's just like I'll go to the level where I can just hang, and then I'll hopefully get dragged along. And then I was in Innsbruck at their second event last year, and like one of the riders, at Rotorua, basically like he was in practice for slopestyle, and they have this feature which is like, imagine just opening a window of a 3-story building and riding out of it and onto a landing.
Right, okay.
And he was doing a flat drop, which is basically where if you've ever like gone off the back of your bike and just stood up, imagine doing that but completing a backflip off of it. So like you just basically loop out and do a complete backflip and go to a landing that's like 3 stories down.
And there's no ramp.
There's no ramp.
It's just flat. So you're basically just using your momentum going down.
Yeah, you're basically almost deliberately.
You're doing like a wheelie and then looping out of the wheelie and continuing it.
So he tried to do that and basically like just missed the edge. Like he just mistimed it. And when you do that, you're basically like...
You've got no left at all. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. You're just a dead weight.
Yeah.
At that point. Yeah.
And he fell on his head from 3 stories up and just KO'd. I was racing at this point. I was not there in like any medical way whatsoever. And he got taken to hospital and checked out and stuff. And I was chatting to his team manager, John Oldale, who is the manager of Marin. So like one of mountain biking's like oldest brands.
So who was this?
So it was Matt Jones, so like another really big like Red Bull athlete in the UK. He's got a massive YouTube channel. So he was there competing at that, totally whacked his head. I went to see him just because his manager was like, kind of knew what I did, knew I'd worked with a few athletes and stuff. And checked him out, and I was like, gave him all this advice about concussion and stuff like that, what to look out for, what his recovery process was. And then just, I wasn't working with him in any like formal way, so I kind of just left him to it. Obviously I was like, if you need anything, just let me know. I kind of just had this agreement with mountain bikers that if you need help, I'll do it. That's just how the sport works. It's a family kind of thing. And then it came to Innsbruck at the next round. So like fast forward like 4 months, and obviously like Crankworx came from Canada, and Canada's got like ice hockey, American football. It's got a lot of high contact sports. So they actually have concussion protocols for when people can come back.
Right.
And he rocked up to register for slopestyle at Innsbruck, and they're like, have you got a signed off recovery protocol? Like something from a doctor saying like, you've been through all these stages? And he was like, oh no, nobody in the UK does that. I wouldn't even know who to go and talk to about that. So he messaged me, and I was like, well, yeah, I'm here racing. And he was like, oh dude, could you like come and sign me off? Because otherwise I'm just not going to get to ride. Which seems like quite extreme, but it's, I think, the way the sport's going to have to start going, and the way a lot of sports are going to start going. So I went to see him, and I like did a full check over with him again, and like obviously I'd been in touch with him and like seen his media stuff the weeks before, and was like, no, I'm happy for you to ride. So I went over to the team that were working there, the central management team, and I was like, yeah, I'm a doctor, I ride. I saw Matt in Rotorua. I've seen him here. Like, I'm happy. I know I'm not his like listed physician, but I'm happy to sign him off for this. And they were like, okay, well, that's good enough for us, as long as the doctor can put their name to it and say that. And then I got chatting to Crankworx about it, and they said, well, we've been looking at running this pilot project where we actually get riders to come and see you before an event, because it's kind of a common thing in other sports where like even like pee-wee hockey and stuff like that in the States and New Zealand, and pee-wee rugby in New Zealand, like the kids will get what's called a concussion baseline test done. So you have a gauge of kind of where you are, and they said, well, we'd love you to come out to Whistler and run this pilot project for us, and just like literally just be an athlete physician for that group of athletes. So that started me working a little bit more on what I do with Action Sports Medical.
Good opportunity.
Oh, hell yeah. The thing is, like, I wasn't sure if it was like I knew I wanted to work in mountain biking, and I knew I was not going to make money from racing, but I thought, kind of, if I stick out the racing for long enough and I get chatting to people long enough and see if there's a demand for this, then great.
Is it like, you plan on like building a team on this, or do you think it's something that's
I think it's going to be a natural evolution of...
Right, okay, there's no like plan, it's just going to happen when it happens kind of thing.
Pretty much. The sport's evolving at a pace, and whilst I'm hoping to be like one of those steering influences in it, as it were, also like the reality is that once you get out of those top 15, 20 World Cup guys, the money drops. I don't think there's going to be that level of infrastructure until like guys who aren't qualifying for World Cups are, getting paid enough to, have their money, do the season and retire on it kind of thing, which just is not the case right now. However, like Crankworx are really pushing forward with stuff. They have a lot of media exposure that they do with athletes, and with those core slope style guys, it's turning into it's a very serious professional sport now. So yeah, I'm just kind of happy I got to do that work with Crankworx really.
Right, okay.
And yeah, I'd like to start rolling out more to other race series and things like that. Like I'd love to go and work with Downhill World Cup if they'd have me, but it just seems like the will isn't quite there with it yet.
So do you think there's more of a demand then for it, like on the broad scale rather than in the UK then?
Yeah, I mean, UK in sport are like, we're pretty bad, if I'm honest, in terms of like athlete support. If you are within like an Olympic program, you're set.
Right, okay.
But outside of that, it's very difficult and very hard to come by, which is why like being a Red Bull rider in the UK is huge, because you just know that you are set at that point. Like Red Bull, like one of the most coveted things in mountain biking is getting a Red Bull helmet, because like only Red Bull athletes have it, and they probably get paid like a lot less than people think that they get paid by the company.
Right, okay.
However, they know that they have training, like physio, the best surgeons, like recovery, like if anything goes wrong in their life, like Red Bull kind of, they've got them, and that's a pretty valuable insurance policy. But you look at like sports medicine in like the US, and they're just so far ahead of us.
Is that because of the whole private healthcare and the NHS kind of thing? Do you think that's...
I don't think so.
No.
I think it's mainly because we've just like, I think it's just a UK attitude thing where we see like you should be doing work, like work is your thing, and then sport is a pastime.
Yeah.
Whereas in the States, it's
yeah, sport is just so integral to people's lives.
It's business.
Yeah, like look at
100% way you can make money as free sports, whereas in the UK,
that's the college football programs and all that kind of thing. It's like
what's the most expensive advertising slot in the world?
The Super Bowl.
Super Bowl.
No.
Is it not?
No, it's March Madness. So it's college basketball.
Is it?
College basketball.
Yeah. March Madness is when like you get a 64 bracket of all the college like basketball teams. And the thing is like none of them are getting paid. They're like student athletes, which is another issue. But like have a look at the sporting facilities that these colleges have. Like, oh my God. When I was at medical school, you can look at going and doing things called electives during your summer holiday, where you go and get experience of like other countries or other areas of work and stuff. So I was, annoyingly, you get 2 of them. In my junior one, I was fairly boring. I went and did a research project. It was in spinal injuries, so it was worth it. But, and for my senior one, I was like, I want to go abroad. So I got speaking to what was called the Asterisk medical crew, or now called the Alpinestars medical crew. So if you've ever watched like motocross racing, there's a kind of winter like and then summer series, and they go to all of the like continental US races. They drive around in a giant truck, and they basically have like an accident emergency department in a truck. You could go in there in any shape and be stabilized like and fine before they send you off site, and they've got like consultant like anesthetic doctors, like trauma doctors, like they have just got everything, because motocross racing's gnarly, man. Like you could anything could happen at any point. Like someone could lose a limb.
Well, is that just from like falling, or do you get things like trapped and stuff, or is it the speed element?
Yeah, like they're just going so fast, and there's like 20 guys on like bikes that are 450cc, I actually I clean knocked myself out and separated my shoulder once. I snapped a chain coming out the gate, and it just like sends you up in the air and you flip onto your head. You think you're going to be a hero, and then but yeah, like I look to go and work with them for an off season, and like unfortunately, like I couldn't even get insured to be on site with them, which was a shame. And then I thought, well, why don't I just go? Like I was playing like British Premier basketball at the time, like at uni. And I thought it'd be amazing to go over to like North Carolina and go to like one of the colleges and work with the doctors, because they actually have like 8 doctors as part of their college. Like, can you imagine like Strathclyde Uni just casually saying, we've got 8 surgeons on site? It's big business there. Yeah, there's aspects of it that aren't cool, obviously. I don't get my entire life from John Oliver, but if you ever like are interested in it, there's a show he does called Last Week Tonight, which in the States is seen as exceptionally left-wing. But from our point of view, it's like fairly down the middle, I would say. But he just does like journalistic exposés on certain issues, and one of them he does is on like March Madness, college basketball. And I mean, the coaches are earning like, they're on like $1.5 million contracts to be a college coach before endorsement. So like they run coaching camps, they get shoe sponsorship, everything. And there was a case about like, there's one kid who's like scraping his way through his mandatory courses whilst playing for a team that is about to play in the final of March Madness for the most expensive advertising slot on American TV. We're talking trillions of dollars here. And his father passed away and he couldn't afford a flight home. So his coach bought him a sandwich and put him on a plane, and then got dragged up before the College Electoral Commission for breaking the rules for buying things for a student. It's pretty broken in some ways. So it's not the be all and end all being like that horrendously into sport. But I would say in terms of the spectrum, I mean, we've got one professional like sports athlete consultant in Scotland, and they work at Hampden.
Really?
Yeah. It's growing. I mean, there's a growing sports medicine department across in Edinburgh, and I think just your average UK citizen is getting more active, but the demand just isn't there. Right. So if you want to get into sports medicine, usually you'll go to like US or Canada or Australia or even New Zealand now, just because like sport's just so part of everyday life.
So how are you with your social media and stuff, if anyone wants to find you?
So I'm on Instagram at Action Sports Medical. That's the best place to find me. Yeah, I've got some, like, it's mostly like writing content that I put on there, a little bit of professional stuff, a little bit of education stuff. I'm really trying to take the like public concussion education a bit more seriously, because it's a serious issue that really we don't talk about enough. So like that can link you to my website, like actionsportsmedical.com, and there's stuff like walking you through what to do if you've had a head hit and like what your recovery stages are. Imagine somebody turn around to you, it's like, oh, you've just injured your brain. That's all you've done. Yeah. So like concussions, just, I think because we've like been boxing for so long and stuff like that, like it's kind of been a normalized thing for people to be knocked out. The evidence now coming out from American football is that if you've had 3 concussions during your professional career and you don't rehabilitate them properly, your risk of anxiety and depression is 3 times higher than like a normal person. I mean, that's pretty scary. And if you just go back to competing with concussion symptoms, you're 6 times more likely to have another injury or to mess up, which in ball sports means you like roll your ankle. Yeah. In mountain biking, that could mean you're dead. Yeah. So, it's something that's more of a frequent conversation in sport, which is important.